Hi guys, this is Rohan again, and in this video we're going to be going over user input and how we can get it in Swift and what we can do with it. So, to resume with our space adventure project, remember we're in our main.swift file like we left off from the last video. So, this time we want to use user input because we have we're interacting with the user, but we're telling stuff to the user, but we're not interacting with them yet. They don't really have a say. They can't really give us any information. So to start with, we're going to say we're going to say in the beginning we're going to welcome our user with their name. We're going to ask them what their name is. So just like before, we want to print out our question. And this is a string, remember, with our double quotation marks. And we want to just ask them, what is your name? And so if we run this, nothing much happens differently. It just prints out, well, what is your name over here? And it doesn't do anything differently because we haven't allowed them to give us input yet. But so the next thing we want to do is we can get their input and put it in a variable. So like before, we assigned some constants, and their name isn't going to change, so we're going to use a constant again. In Swift, we use constants maybe like 50% of the time, which is quite a lot compared to every other language. It just happens to be built that way. So we say let name. We're going to name our variable, our constant name, and we're going to assign it to, this is, I'm going to type it out. So this is a built-in Swift method called readline, and it gives us a string back. Well, you'll see if we just run it right now. So it'll pause the program essentially, and it'll wait for it there, and it printed out what is our name because we put it before the readline. But after the readline, well, now we're in this line, line 12, in readline. So we want to show. Well, so now we can type in our name. So let's say my name is Rohan. So we give it Rohan. But we didn't do anything with that yet. We actually assigned it to name, but we haven't printed it out yet, or let's try to do that next. Maybe we can use our concepts of string interpolation that we learned last time, and we can print out some the name. We can say, how about nice to meet you. And then this time we want to interpolate name because we are using that variable. So now if we run this using Command R, or remember the play button, so if we run this, we can actually use that information. So right now I type out Rohan, it'll say nice to meet you. Wait, optional Rohan, what's that? So readline actually gives us a optional value, which in Swift is a special type of uh, special data type. All data types can be optional or not. We're going to be going in very detail what an optional is later, but for now I'm going to ask you to just trust me, and to get rid of that optional, Rohan, we just want to make it not optional, so we're going to use an exclamation point. And I'm not going to go into depth on what this is actually doing yet, but we're going to be doing that into maybe the 6th or 7th video. So now if we run this again, we're going to type out what is my name, and this time it doesn't give us any ugly optional stuff in our string. So this is user input. So now we want to use our user input in something else, because now we're welcoming them to our solar system. And so let's ask them first, do we want to go to a different planet? How about, in this case, well, let's say, let's go on an adventure. And then on a new line, we want to say, shall I randomly choose a planet for you to visit? And so this is our question where we want to say, we want to get an input. And then this time we want to make our input y or n, just to let the user know. This is what we're going to print out. So we're going to tell them, shall I randomly choose a planet for you to visit, y or n? So if we run this, remember we haven't added any input, but we can see that it's printing out properly right after you enter your name. And now it prints it out, but we haven't asked for input yet, so let's do that next. So we want to say, maybe, let's call our variable name decision. So we want to say let decision equals, like before, readline, and then our exclamation point, like I told you. Remember the parentheses. And this is parentheses because readline is a built-in Swift method, which we're going to talk about later. We're going to talk about methods soon after, maybe in one video or two videos. And so this is a method that we're calling that Swift has built in, and then it's giving us the value, and it's allowing us to interact with the user in this way. So we say their decision, but so now we have their decision. It's probably they're going to enter either y or n. So now we probably want to do something if they say y and if they say n, or maybe just if they say y. Maybe we'll say if they say y first. So this is using an if statement, and what an if statement does is it checks a Boolean condition. And a Boolean is either true or false. And so sorry about that. So our decision is either y or n, and we want to check sorry, I have the cough. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we want to check a condition. So in this case, we're going to check the condition if decision is equal to, let's say if it's equal to y. And so what this is doing is decision, remember, is our variable name. And this right here, this equal, is checking if something is equal to. We don't want to use one equal because that's what Swift uses for assignment and variables. So we want to check equal. We want to use equal to check whether some two things are equal. And if two things are equal, then it'll be true. And if things are not equal, then this entire thing will evaluate to false. And essentially an if statement has has a condition that can either be true or false. And if in our case, if the user types in y, then it'll be true. So what we're going to do after is that we're going to say if something, then we're going to do something else. And in this case, this is we're going to use a curly bracket, a right facing, and then a left facing to close it. And then anything we do in between these will be in that case. If this, then do that. So so if they say yes, we want to take them to a different planet. And we're going to be making that functional in a later video, so we can type a comment here to let whoever's reading our code, or let ourselves, that this is a to-do for us, that we want to later, it's on our to-do list, that we want to make, we want to say travel to random planet. So that's our to-do, it's on our to-do list. And then we also have else, which means that else comes after an if statement, and it tells us if this happens. Remember, our if statement tells us if this is true, then we do what's inside here, these two brackets, and then else is kind of like saying otherwise. So if our statement is not true, if it's false, this will not execute. it'll go to the else statement, and then whatever we put in this block of code will execute. So in this case, we want to say, just remember our question was, shall I randomly choose? So then in this case, in the else case where they say, no, we don't want a random choice, we want to say we want to print out to the user, let's say, okay, name the planet you would like to visit. Okay, so now we do it depending on that, and then we want to add a to-do saying let the user select planet. Okay, so now we have we're prompting the user for their choice, and then we're doing something accordingly. And we haven't actually started doing something because we are still planning that. So what we want to do now is, so now we can run this. So when we run it, we find that it is working. And so we ask for a name, and then it asks, shall I randomly choose a planet for you to visit, Y or N? And let's, in this case, say Y. And so you'll notice that this isn't, we didn't give it a capital Y. We actually gave it a lowercase y, which is not what it asked for. And because that lowercase y is not equal to that capital Y, we don't, this values to false, and then we go to this else statement. So that's a bit it's probably something we want to later come back to and make a bit more user friendly, because people don't necessarily just want to capitalize one letter. That's a bit of a hassle. So but in this case we handled it as an else. So that's why you say, okay, name the planet. And if we run again with a capital Y, so then it'll say, it actually won't say anything because we don't print anything in this. But the important part is that it doesn't print out, okay, name the planet you'd like to visit. I would like to visit. Okay, so that's user input. And later on, we're gonna clean up this code, and well, we're gonna add some checking to make sure that, like in this case, our lowercase y doesn't really work. We're gonna make that a bit more user friendly in the next video. But for now, we are done with this video.